Is
Or
it working
you have to
now?
push them. Yeah.
Is the audio working now?
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I think if it's
If
illuminated,
it's
on.
illuminated green, it's on. There's just that push button.
Okay.
Just push the button.
That's okay.
Okay, go ahead,
Just a
please.
suggestion, just like with any confirmation hearings, Senate hearings, or any of those things political, I think it would be a good idea to limit it to 3 minutes. If there's any comments or questions we need to ask, as it relates to addressing the public or, addressing any issues that we have here, to keep things on a time. I know we're not going to do Robert's Rules of Order, but just a suggestion,
Okay,
I'm not sure I understand. So you're saying you want to limit the time we have to ask people questions?
Not necessarily. Say for instance, of course, that would be a benefit, say for instance, not instance and going on and, going away from what our main purpose is, but 3 minutes would not be a bad idea, But if anyone thinks we need to go farther than, if there's second level questions that need to be asked, of course, but as far as comments and questions that we need to ask, we could limit it to 3 minutes at the most. But if we need to follow up, that's a different story.
okay, as we've got the opportunity for public comment. And
Right.
there's a time limit on that already,
Yes,
okay? And when we actually talk to members, my concept was we would probably have them here for an hour. A much longer period of time.
Fine.
But we certainly could set some rule about if you're going to answer a question,
set the limit.
to set a limit to it so you don't get long speeches from the.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. If we can, maybe we can play that by ear a little bit as we get into it, and so it's a good suggestion. Thank you, Alicia.
I should have said that. I'm sorry, I'm just not waking up. I meant to
And to
answer.
follow up with that, Chairman, when I was serving the TVA board, I thought they made a wise decision when they allowed public comments, and they have a lot of public comments. They did limit the time as we have, but they requested that none of the members of the board interact. In other words, don't try to answer the question, don't interact with them, just let them have their say. And then a staff person would be here assigned to follow up with them, either in writing or a phone call. So I think that's wise because we might say something inappropriate or promise something we can't deliver, whereas the staff would know how to properly respond to these. But I do think they deserve a response.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments from you?
Chair, just as a point of order, are we on approval of the minutes at this juncture? Okay. If I may, it's on a similar topic because when I did read through the minutes, section 5, page 3, we had a fairly extended conversation about public comment because it is very important. But I read a sentence there and I was like, did I say that? So I did go back and rewatch that portion of our discussion. And so I just wanted to ask staff, I found in several places where I thought there was maybe a conflation of the comment period with the comments themselves, right? So here it says Vice Mayor Henderson recommended that reasonable restriction be placed on comments. No, we were talking about the comment period. And then confusingly, comment, and that I said comment must sign up in person and in advance. And I think Chair had offered a proposal of sign up in advance. And then we engaged from there to progress to in person. And so, comments will be made on first come, first serve basis. Well, no, actually sign up is on a first come, first serve basis, and it has to be balanced. As well, an indication of on-demand language support. No, we said that you would call ahead to request that support. So I just didn't feel like this was entirely accurate representation of the debate. Obviously, happily, we have a video record, right? And to your question, Chair, about, is this, I do think this is a good distillation, right? Like you don't want your minutes to be a verbatim recitation of what transpired at the meeting. But I just wanted to ask before approval to kind of be on the record for a kind of maybe re-listen by staff and a little more precision or refinement in this section because it was so important to the commission that we just get all those Correct, please, sir.
Okay, would you like these minutes modified to reflect what you just said?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, we handle, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll modify the minutes
Thank you.
and rewatch.
With that modification, I make a motion to approve.
Second?
All right, any further discussion of the minutes? All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, they're passed. We come to the public comment period. Have any people signed up to comment?
We did not have anyone sign up for public comment. However, I just received notice from a staff person that somebody had called our office and is worried that they're going to miss the public comment period. And so we may have a member of the public joining us shortly who's interested in making public comment. They thought we were meeting in Sunny West, not the Board of Education room, so they went to the wrong location.
With everyone's agreement, I think we can accommodate that person when they come here and hear what they have to say. All right. Okay. The main things that I wanted to try and accomplish today were, I guess, the organization of the way we go about doing our work. Before I do that, I also would like to ask, Daryl, you were not here the last time to give a little introduction to yourself. Could you give us the 30-minute biography, or I'm sorry, the 30-second biography of the...
30 seconds probably covered.
Or 60, you know.
Yeah. Been in the utility world for over 40 years. Worked at municipal utilities mainly. Worked in the private sector for about 12 years and have been president, CEO, general manager of Dixon Electric System for the last 18 and a half, which is a utility neighbor to Nashville Electric, along with some other electric cooperatives. We're a municipal electric system that serves a geographical area that's very similar to what Nashville Electric has, over 600 square miles of service area in parts of 7 counties. And so very familiar. I saw in the minutes you referenced the 94 ice storm. I have all the major events burned into my memory because I have worked almost all of those, from major floods in 2010, minor ice storms, and the most recent one, which I was hoping to avoid in my career, the Winter Storm Fern. So a lot of experience, engineer by trade. I always consider myself an engineer, but I don't get to do as much engineering work as I used to because I have other responsibilities now.
Thank you. Okay, one of the things that I'd like to do, I think, and spend a little bit of time on is Kendra and I worked on what you have this here work plan for the 2026 Winter Storm Commission in front of you here, in which we tried to kind of put down, I think it's 8 pages worth of just talking a little bit about how we're going to go about our jobs in terms of doing this. And I think it's worth some time today going through this, making any changes you would like to see to it, and just generally as a commission coming to a point where we all have some general agreement on the approach that we're taking to this. So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through this for a little bit, and so on. Maybe starting with that first section of objectives, which are basically what we're going to review, what the work product is going to be, what the evaluation criteria are going to be, and then an acknowledgement of the need for transparency in this. So I guess I would open it up to see if people have any thoughts or comments or how you feel about this as a set of objectives for this commission. Does it reflect what you think we were asked to do and what do you want to do, try and accomplish? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. In Section 1, subsection 1, major participants supporting participants, I think I would ask that among major participants, Metro government and the Department of Emergency Management be listed first rather than NES. Clearly a major participant, but I have been somewhat concerned as far as, representing Metro government myself, we have things to learn as well, how we interacted with our utility, how we communicated with our constituents, and ultimately, we are responsible. And I've heard some concern that this is a commission for purposes of solely scrutinizing NES's operations. And so I would just ask that thus they not be sort of the lead major participant. I think kind of the order of things should be Metro Government, Office of Emergency Management, NES certainly, and then on down there through the corresponding departments rather than leading with NES.
Okay, and Kendra, I missed that added, obviously, since we originally had OEM in there.
We did, and my interpretation, Vice Mayor, of your comment is also switching the order of them, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So explicitly stating Office of Emergency Management, but also listing Metro Government Office of Emergency Management first, then Nashville Electric Service. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Other thoughts about I think the work product's straightforward, but I guess I'd like you to focus on the evaluation criteria a little bit. Is there anything you would add to that, or is there? Yeah.
Chair, if I might make explicit on the commission work product, I appreciate and respect that this is established by executive order by the mayor. And that is the first and primary person for whom we are providing this information. But as it is the mayor and the public, I would ask that the Metro Council please be explicitly listed subsequent to the mayor in the commission work product.
I think that's a good point. Thank you. Other thoughts? I'd like to open this question to you all a little bit of transparency. I mean, that's a word. I'd like to know what you think it means in terms of this commission. Are there things that, I mean, obviously we're holding public meetings, we're corresponding what we do to the law in terms of what's required for open meetings and so on. Are there other things that we should be doing to further transparency, to indicate transparency?
If I may, Chair. I think that maybe one of the things that we could do in terms of the furtherance of transparency is having some accessibility methodologies. So making sure that individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing have transcripts available of the meetings and have the ability to be able to interact. I know that we have made accommodation to allow for public comment to be submitted via email. I think that we certainly should make that available. And also, I think we talked at the previous meeting about language accessibility. I think that's going to be very important as well.
Okay, so I had, with apology, I had a little difficulty hearing all that over here. So you asked first of all about I know you said about translation.
Certainly, translation and other accessibility models, specifically for those who might be
Okay, and
hard of hearing.
what do you have in mind we should do?
I think that there are maybe some coordinated partnerships that we could use to make sure that our information is readily accessible by all members of the community. Perhaps we could work with the Tennessee Immigrant Rights and Refugee Coalition. I know that they provide translation services for some in the area, and perhaps if there are folks who request that transcripts be made in certain languages, that we could do that.
Okay, now do we have transcripts of this meeting?
We can look into creation of those.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
If I may, Chair, I very much support the intent of Mr. Hughes's request. I would ask that Metro Nashville Network, YouTube, Nashville.gov, we are working very intentionally to make sure, like if somebody is in the council chamber, there is live transcription in our two most, in Spanish and Arabic for the gallery and online as well. Ms. Zeitlin might be able to speak to that. So to meet your request, I think we already have kind of onboard and embedded services. I went to rewatch that portion of for purposes of minutes. That YouTube and the functionality there. I know we have sort of Google Translate on a lot of our Nashville.gov points of access. And so I would want to make sure, please, that we don't create a redundancy, but it's incumbent on us to communicate very clearly how to access those things. So I do appreciate the spirit of the comment, but I just want to make sure we didn't set up a duplication.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like we don't know yet the extent to which there'll be demand for some of these things. So, there clearly is the capability. I think you mentioned it here, and it's available in a lot of places now to create transcripts automatically of meetings. Perhaps we could wait and see if any of those if there's a request for them, and maybe let some of these organizations, like you mentioned, know that we're willing to try and provide something if they have people who want it. But not do an expensive, elaborate thing unless there's some demand for it. Would that be acceptable to you?
That would be acceptable to me. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I kind of notice as we sit here is, we had a lot of interest in the first meeting, and that was great. We spent a lot of time talking about the importance of public comment and how we would handle it. And we don't have, with the exception of potentially one person coming, we don't have there's no shortage of interest, of course, in this subject. So I guess I don't have a solution exactly. I hate when people bring a question without a solution. But my question would be, what can we do to make sure that folks are really getting notice that these meetings are happening and encourage public comment? Because it just seems like we should have a line out the door. So interested in that.
Kendra, how are these meetings noticed?
We are placing a notification and a schedule on our website for Winter Storm Commission meetings. So there's a specific page for the commission, and then every time we add an actual event occurrence, it is added to the webpage along with the agenda. There is a mechanism through our email delivery service where you can actually subscribe to receive those regular updates. But something that comes to mind for me is once we settle upon our schedule, we could work with communications teams to see if they could actually do something more robust and really push that out to media in a proactive sense so people are aware of our meeting schedule. I think the challenge has been that we still haven't quite settled on schedule.
Yes.
To build on what Dr. Abkowitz was speaking of when you land on Nashville.gov for any particular commission, there is a button to sign up to receive notice. And so any citizen of Nashville, I'm interested in the Arts Commission, I'm interested in the council agendas, you effectively can develop a menu. And then anytime anything is, it can be set such that not just for the publishing of the agenda, but when the site is updated and materials are added, and then you are sort of proactively getting in your inbox. So, but I do think, again, it's incumbent on us to help citizens know that that is an option. And I would ask that the communications team does have sort of a standard graphic or for this commission, and that the Metro Nashville platform on social media shares when these meetings are happening, shares the website and all those postings. And then we as participants, if we see fit on our own platforms, can share that, as can organizations that know that their members would have interest. And I think just setting up a, kind of expectation that X days in front of each commission meeting, there will be a posting, we're aware of it, we can share it as we see fit, organizations can share it as they see fit, and it gives that point of access. Here's the website, here's the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, Felicia?
To expand on what you all have stated. I do think it's critically important from a communications and media standpoint that the media is well aware. The media has done a lot of reporting about this NES Storm Commission meeting and things of that nature, and we've seen a lot of people are finding the information out from the media. A lot of people, older or elderly, may not have access to the internet. And since there's so much investigative reporting being done, as we all know, for the past week, as it relates to transparency, preferential treatment, things of that nature, that kind of stirs people up emotionally, that they want to be involved. And I think that if it's possible, the communication team, to reach out to whoever the news director is at those different stations, because I know WSMV has reported on the story, the Tennessean has reported on the story, WTVF, and WKRN. So if you have a contact, a media contact, just let them know. You don't have to say whatever, just say, wanted to let you know since you're reporting on the story, get this information out, the Winter Storm Commission, because I think you're going to reach more people, because all broadcast systems has a 100-mile radius of the market. So you're including everyone that's not only in Nashville, but in Brentwood and Franklin and different areas. So I think it would be a good idea that we definitely work closely with the media, number one. And then, social media, because it is limited. Not everyone knows to go to the website. So just wanted to put in that suggestion.
To change the subject just a little bit, there is one item that I kind of mentioned, and that's the budget priorities of NES.
Madam Speaker, if I may, would you press your button so I just be sure the public can hear you? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. One of the things I mentioned, just to change the subject a little bit, budget priorities of NES. And I'm hearing that consistently from people who will come and talk to me, because I've noticed over my years, budgets tell you what your priorities are. And so I kind of like to see how much we're spending on preparedness and supplies versus some other items that NES is involved in. I think that if we don't address that, we're kind of missing a big item. However, I don't want to reach out over the scope of this commission. So I'll defer to the judgment of the commission, but
So you're talking about item number 3, evaluation criteria?
yes, evaluating.
Okay, so adding into that the concept of looking at budgets specifically.
Right.
Okay. Going back to item number 4 for a moment, there have been a number of, I think, excellent comments. I don't know the structure of the communications office and the mayor's office, but it seems to me that assembling a list of at least email addresses of key media outlets, and I think probably some of the NGOs that you were referring to, and just maybe just a regular way of sending out meeting notices to them, and even if it's just to point them to a website in many cases, but just to let them know about it. Is that something that's within the capability that can be handled in the mayor's office?
Yeah, we've got a regular list of partners that ranges from NGOs, just in general, but then also many of those that were intimately involved with storm recovery and response. We could also send this to the VOAD organizations or ask that the VOAD distribute that on our behalf. And then our Office of Neighborhoods and Civic Engagement also has a really robust listserv of neighborhood associations. So I think there are a variety of different mechanisms that we could use to push this information out.
Okay, and in terms of the information that goes out, I mean, certainly the notice of upcoming meetings, formal meetings, and do you want to send minutes of those meetings afterwards? How do you all feel about that?
Are you talking about to the different medias or?
Yeah, to just,
I think it's almost like you need to put together like a press release. I don't think, if they want information about the minutes of the meeting, they could probably go on to the GOV website. But just.
all right, well, let's start out with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chair, if I may. So Metro has a media list, and so I think it would be a simple media advisory in advance. And then I would just suggest there is a standard template with which the mission of the commission and the website itself, and that's where you point people for the minutes and the recordings and the emails, and that is just a template. And so by way of notice, the media does sign up for those notice lists, and then to supplement that, I mean, on top of that, there is a standard media advisory. So there is a whole kind of system of that within Metro already established.
Okay, and so as a starting in piece of this process then, I guess we'd ask the communications department to establish, they probably already have much of it, a list of the media, but also NGOs that we consider relevant to this discussion, and send them as a minimum notice of upcoming meetings together with pointing them to the website for additional information and resources. So that's something we can do?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
And Chair, I might briefly interrupt and note that we do have a member of the public
okay.
who has arrived and interested in providing public comment.
Good. Okay, shall we break here for a moment and give this person a chance, an opportunity to speak? And could you describe your name and affiliation, if any, and we'd be anxious to hear what you have to say.
Testing. Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone. My apologies for being late. I got misinformation or miscommunication about the location. So I was at the Howard Building waiting since 9:30 so I could be there in time. But thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Ruby Baker, and for the past 18 years, I've served as president of our Bordeaux Hills Residential Association. And what I'd like to share is my perspective as a neighborhood leader regarding the Winter Storm Fern. I heard from many departments giving their update, but I didn't hear anyone giving you information from a neighborhood leader perspective. So during your last meeting with the Metro departments, it was clear to me that no one could have predicted the level of impact the storm caused. This experience showed us what is working and brought to the surface areas that need improvement in the constituent services we provide. I've seen how much our neighbors depend on us as neighborhood leaders during crises like this, and they often come to us for answers. But during this event, I sometimes felt helpless because it was difficult to find clear information and resources to share early on. My request is for neighborhood leaders to be included in the future discussions and communications when possible. We are trusted voices in our community and stand ready to work with any department that need our service and assistance. Residents are concerned now about the higher than normal NES bills. Many expected credits after the outage but did not see them, but some received missed messages when they contacted NES, which caused frustration added to the confusion. If an NES could attend a community meeting to explain the NES bill, usage, rates, and components such as weatherheads and meters, this would be very helpful. As for NDOT, we understand the large volume of debris that must be collected and that specific timelines can be difficult to guarantee. Lastly, this experience also showed me the need to strengthen our own neighborhood preparedness. So I plan to work closely with OEM and host preparedness workshops to improve our emergency planning, communication, and disaster readiness. Thank you for your time, but my one point is the miscommunication. I know it was a slight oversight, but perhaps when we talked last week, we're talking with Kendra, and you said the meeting was today at 10, but you did not mention the location, so I assumed it was at the Howard Building. So I was very, very frustrated because my point was the miscommunication, and this was an example. Even one small point can cause a lot of frustration, and that's what our residents are complaining about. When they come to me for answers and I don't have them, then I come to you. So I'm just asking you to thoroughly vet any program connected to NES, NDOT, and any of the others that provide constituent services. And please make sure our neighborhood leaders are included in that table discussion. And my point is, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. So we want to be at the table.
Thank you very much. We
Thank you,
appreciate
sir.
that. Thank you.
Thank you for this time.
Thank you. Kendra, based on that comment, I might suggest that we could add to the list of people to get notifications, any neighborhood leaders that, that they have some, such as this member of the public or this lady as well.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I'll even go one step further, and perhaps we can actually bring a listing of the neighborhood associations that we actually have in our listserv as a reference document for this group, so that you all can add to that.
If I could say, one other thing, I've had some state reps call me a little upset that they felt like satellite cities were not kept informed. And I know you can't invite the entire Belmead City Hall here, but you could have the mayor of Belmead know that this is happening, or the mayor of Oak Hill or Forest Hills, because they had constituents calling them and really didn't feel like they were getting the information they needed. So I would say at least the satellite cities should be aware of these meetings and have input.
Okay, so we're looking at adding into your master list an appropriate contact at the satellite cities. There's still 7 of them, correct? Okay, and these neighborhood associations. Thank you. Yes.
My only other suggestion would be that I know we talked about this briefly before the meeting here to talk about maybe making sure that we're going to the same location as often as possible. So, I know that Sunny West is an attractive place to meet because it's got so much of the infrastructure, but if this winds up being a more available space more often, then maybe we try to lock it down to be the same place every time.
Kendra, I think when we had talked before, you were looking at seeing whether this location, which is a little easier in terms of parking and accessibility and so on, could be used. Can we check on that?
Yep. Well, once we can, we'll look into that generally, and specifically once we know when our upcoming meetings are.
Okay. Good. If we could return now to the work plan. The second item in the work plan is the deliverables. I think that's fairly straightforward, and just what was requested. Specified in the mayor's executive order, but I'm certainly open to any comments or changes anyone would like to make in this. The one thing that I would point out in this is that implied in this is that the first report is a factual report about what has happened when and so on. And the final report includes specific commission recommendations about changes that we think would improve the response in the future. The point being that I think we would want to take some time to go over those after we have all our facts together and so on. So that one thing I would point out to you and make sure that everybody's comfortable with that. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the documents, and I want to express my appreciation for the master timeline. I think that is so helpful in a wide variety of ways for elected officials and bodies like this to just understand the sequence of things. So I just wanted to elevate my appreciation for that aspect. But as well, and I think I touched on this last time, I am interested to understand specifically for Metro government, it seems to me as elected official, there is a wide variety of after-action reports. I do not understand, particularly if there is a Metro-specific rubric for that. And so it feels like, you kind of have an after-action and, well, this department chose to highlight this and that department chose to highlight that. And I'm not saying there's not space for separate narrative or content, but I did just want to make sure there, if the commission thinks applicable, that, and I think it's spoken to here more in the interview protocols, but there's just a standard expectation for what will be in these after actions or evaluations by the departments so that it is sort of apples to apples to apples, at least within Metro government. And I see that desire for consistency in the interview protocols, but I just wanted to make sure that was also in whatever Metro is doing presently with the departments, kind of in line share with when the departments came and spoke to us last time. Great appreciation, but it really ran the gamut, right? It was verbal, 2 slides, 10 slides, a lot of data, no data. So I just want to make sure that we're getting that both in our interview process, but also in our documents so that after actions aren't necessarily, kind of just loosey-goosey and that there's some standardization of those, please. Thank you, sir.
Okay, my understanding is that I think most of the relevant Metro departments are doing something in forms of an after-action report specifically. But I guess that I would say that I'm not sure it's the business of this commission to be telling departments of Metro government how they ought to do those after-action reports. That might fall more to the council or to the mayor's office to do. I'd looked at it as what fire does is probably different than what transportation does in terms of those reports, that we will draw on them for information. But the internal process in those departments, I think, is the business of the council and the mayor more than this commission. Okay, is that?
I appreciate that, Chair. Again, I'm speaking from, I guess, guidance rather than direction. Like it would be my ask that the mayor's administration give guidance to the departments to have I absolutely concur. There's a wide variation of things that should be highlighted by each department, but I think just for our kind of absorption and analysis, some standardization, but I leave that to the mayor's office, just in the guidance space, or a respectful request then.
Yeah. So I just ask Kendra perhaps to communicate to the mayor that there was a desire that some structure be suggested.
Yes, I'm happy to communicate that, and then I'll also share, and we're aware of this because we're on the receiving end of it. Departments are doing sort of their own internal after-action review that is then fed into a larger report that the Office of Emergency Management is preparing on the behalf of this entire event. So there is internal after-action review that departments are doing specific to their own operations, and then that information is fed into this larger report. And we'll talk about this here in a moment, but you'll notice in our data repository, item J, we do have after-action reviews, and so I expect that we'll be able to, at a minimum, get summaries on those to the extent that there isn't any confidential information in there. So we'll be able to see those, and maybe there's some conclusions or recommendations we can draw about the type of information that's in there.
Kendra, a real quick question. I may be jumping ahead. Any idea what a target timeline is on that AAR coming from OEM? I know NES is working on their AAR, and we will probably see, but do you have a target timeline with that?
I do not. I'm happy to see if we can get a target timeline. I still think it's probably a matter of a few weeks. And so I don't feel comfortable giving you a deadline now. I do know that we are close to having a timeline that feels pretty good in terms of comprehensive timeline. And so that is one specific item that, again, can help inform after action reviews. And then I know that the request to submit information to OEM has already been sent out. For example, the mayor's office is putting together their own submission that is part of that right now. So
Thank
that
you.
process is underway. I'll see if I can figure out if there's a specific deadline.
No, thank you very much. I feel like is that information there sort of sets our expectations, right? I'm not sitting around thinking, oh, we're going to have an AR next week, right? Thank you very much. That's all I wanted. Thank you.
Yes.
If I may be recognized just briefly, Mr. Chair, as an organization that comes from lots of acronyms, I just want to make sure that I'm stating on the record that as we're talking through some of these descriptors, I know what an AAR is because I'm seeing it here in the report, but if we could just make that clear to the audience as they're attending, some of the folks may not understand quite specifically what some of these acronyms mean, and if we start to go down that road, we'll be saying all of the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, but not really defining what they are. But I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Well, I would invite you, if that happens, to say, would you please explain what you're talking about, this jargon? I have the same issue.
Mr. Chair, I'll say this, is that you are correct. This world of emergency management and this where we are, this is acronym on steroids, right? It is heavy. So for the group out there, AAR, After Action Report. So OEM, Office of Emergency Management. So just a couple that you guys have already heard this morning.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Maybe we should have an acronym for our commission. The next section of this work plan is the actual strategy, which is kind of the core of it, and so on. That I would like just to go over and make sure we're on the same wavelength. And the first item is, I think, is in some ways probably the most important at the outset, and that is preparing a master timeline. I think that becomes the kind of go-to description of everything that we're concerned about in one place. Kendra is working on preparing that. I believe by the end of next week is going to have the first iteration of that out. I'd emphasize that I see this as a dynamic document that is going to constantly get updated as we interview people and so on, and will end up being fairly detailed. And whether we eventually publish all of the detail of that or whether we summarize it in some way is something we can talk about at the time. And to do that, she's looking at some selected documents like these AARs. And so on. And I said short interviews with department personnel. And what that is these are not the commission interviews. These are really just phone calls to talk to people about, can you explain a little more about this kind of thing, this thing here? And then we can use that to inform about just like who gets interviewed and what some of the kind of questions are and so on. But I think that seemed to all of us as we were looking at this as a key starting point for what we're doing. Would love to have your thoughts about that and any comments you might have about the structure and process to produce it. All right.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
on the topic of interviews in particular, I had relayed a community member who reached out to me in the midst of the storm, had some prior professional association with TEMA acronym, Tennessee Emergency Management Association, and asking questions generally about the timeline, the restoration, what was kind of going on, and I gave my standard response about how the grid works, and I just have a very sort of neutral response. It's a system, it's blah, blah, blah. And her response back to me was very thoughtful and helpful, right? I could tell that she had, some professional thought kind of going into that. And so I did ask her at that time, once this commission was stood up, might I reach back out to her to see if she might want to? And so I think that's my question. I certainly understand for our staff and leadership within Metro and otherwise, but I think maybe there might be a little nervousness in a member of the community, right, being interviewed. And I wanted to know how we would sort of garner maybe some of that professional expertise that might be on offer, or that this commission might think was worthwhile. I never want to put a member of the community in an awkward spot, right? Like sometimes people just want a phone call and to sort of relay some things in their professional capacity that they would think would be helpful. And so I wonder if Ms. Abkowitz could sort of speak to that interview and how that relates to, so I see staff mentioned and folks generally, but how would that work for members of the community that you asked this commission to elevate people we thought, or rather suggest people we thought might be helpful?
So what I understand you're asking is that when we conduct more formal discussions with people about what went on, there are people outside of the departments who may have something to offer. Certainly, the public comment period is intended to be a piece of that question. And I think you're asking the question of are there other ways in which someone could do that? So, actually, when we come to number 3 on this list, perhaps we could discuss that a little bit further. And because I think that's where it belongs in terms of editing this list. But I think
Yes, sir. I apologize. I thought we were speaking generally to the strategy section.
I was just trying to go through 1, 2, 3 as a thing. And
Got it.
So on. Okay. So in terms of, and just for a moment on the timeline, any thoughts about that? I think certainly as any commission member has any thoughts or questions, you can direct them to Kendra, and I'm sure she can respond to them. But I'd say the first iteration of that will be out at the end of next week, and we'll see where we are at that point. The second piece of the strategy was to request documents. The other half of it is to get a timeline together, but also establish a library of the relevant internal kinds of materials. Kendra is planning to put together a list of those and has included in this work plan the preliminary iteration of that list. And I think I would like to go over that with you and see if there are other documents or other sources that you think would be appropriate for this library.
And Chair, I'll just quickly jump in and note that we had a really robust discussion, Hannah and I, yesterday about just acknowledging that some of the documents that this commission might be interested in are confidential in an effort to, again, protect, public health and safety. And so one thing we'll have to discuss as a commission is how we might want to handle documents that are highly relevant to our work, but for good reason, should not be shared publicly. So I note that. I think we have a couple of ideas as to how we could handle that and still sort of get relevant information, but just want to flag that, and you'll see that noted in the work plan that we need to have some additional discussion.
And could I ask the legal department, I think for all of us, to maybe explain, what documents produced internally in Metro or NES are not subject to the Open Records Act and can be considered confidential?
What records would be considered confidential?
Yes.
I'm thinking mostly things that would impact security. A lot of those types of documents, detailed plans about Metro's responses could be considered confidential. The Tennessee Open Records Act is very broad, so pretty much anything that's going to be shared with this commission is going to be a public record. I'll go ahead and say kind of some of our ideas to limit. It will just depend on what the document is, what the confidential part is. We could get redacted versions. We could get summaries of documents. We could have separate documents prepared without without the confidential information. So
Is there a work product exception in the?
there are work product exceptions, but not a general exception that would apply to this commission.
So we'll handle the issue of confidentiality on a document by document basis with consulting with the legal department. Okay. The list here is pretty comprehensive, but I'm certainly open to any suggestions for other things that might be added.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Kendra, I noticed, I was looking through, it was late last night, actually early this morning. I understand it. We're all busy. This is just another side job to the side jobs that we have. You had a comment on, I think, this form right here. And I remember that, reading that. And do you remember what you wrote? And something about it, the comment was, this is going to be a large sum of materials that is going to be forthcoming. I didn't know if you could sort of better explain that, what you sort of meant by that comment in that form.
So the internal communications regarding coordination of services. So this is an item that obviously could be and is likely to be highly relevant to this body's work. However, given the volume of conversations that were ongoing during the actual event and our response, I think in order for it to be meaningful and to not be overwhelming to this group, we need to figure out how to scope and refine that in a very targeted fashion. So I'll share with you as an example. We had an early meeting with Nashville Electric Services General Counsel to sort of say, hey, we're going to be coming to you and requesting a lot of stuff. What's the best way to be efficient about this? And I think they mentioned thousands, like tens of thousands of, records that, if not appropriately defined, and that was for a request that was appropriately defined. And so, again, my thought process is we need to find a way, and I think it's up to our group to decide this, to appropriately scope what internal communications we're interested in. And I really defer to Hannah here, but maybe we're asking for communications between specific individuals or during a specific time period. Because I think if we don't appropriately scope it, it is going to be a volume that I don't think any of us are prepared to or really have the capacity to process. Hannah, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's spot on. Just in the spirit of efficiency and to make sure that this commission is focused on, exactly the information that it needs. We would recommend limiting the scope of internal communications.
Thank you.
Chair, and to Kendra and to legal as well. When you're saying limiting the scope of information, of internal communications, is that correct? What if the internal communications has an effect on external communications? How would you address that?
I think that you all can define if that's something that you want to include within the scope. I think kind of what we were talking about is if you ask for every email that gives any employee a direction related to the storm, it's going to be tens of thousands of emails. So you probably want to say, we want, director level to, manager level emails, something like that. That's just going to cut out, a large portion of communications that this commission probably wouldn't find relevant anyway. But, it's up to you all to define the scope.
I just want to get clarification because sometimes internal communication can affect external communication.
True.
So I just wanted to make sure that we were targeted, if we're talking about just only from executive level, or we're talking about executive level to upper management level,
Yes.
Any of those things, I think would be, we can just kind of target in on those added areas as a strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, I had imagined it as somewhere in the middle between the two possibilities. I certainly wouldn't expect commission members to read every document that's there. It's more a matter of having information available if we'd like to consider it. Things like organizational charts. I mean, I certainly don't plan to go over in detail, but I might have a question as this goes on about who reported to who or something, and then it becomes a resource we can look to. Okay. If as time goes on, as Kendra and other staff members prepare this, if you have any thoughts, commission members, about things that have occurred to you, please just communicate them to them. Again, this like the timeline will be a work in progress. I'm certain as we get into interviews, both the specific ones and the more public ones here, that questions will come up, arise that you'll want some document or some email that someone sent. And then the thought was that they're placed in a repository, meaning something which is accessible online, which people can get to. And this initial list you're going to have by the end of next week, and again, we'll continue to evolve it.
And I'll just quickly note, Speaker Harwell, if it's okay, I have added some budgetary documents or financial documentation to that list as well. So that's something that was missing, but I think that's probably the best place to try to be responsive to your feedback.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, the third section here was structured interviews. And when I was drafting this piece of the thing, I put the word structured in there specifically, just that what we don't want is the same general questions asked to everybody, no matter how relevant they are to what that person's job is and so on. And the idea is that for each interview we have that there's a pre-process to that in which we sort of say, look, this is the question or the questions we're trying to get answered in this interview and focused around that. And then put the notion in of we'd like to at least leave an opening at the end of it where somebody could offer opinions about things. But not make it something where everybody is offering opinions, but not providing the hard factual information that we need. And there again, the idea was the staff would prepare a list of the subject matter in the interviews. I call them staff interviews, and there's a lot of people that we're not going to have a full commission hearing to hear what they have to say. It's just used to bring things forward. The point is made in here at the suggestion of legal that while I think it's fine if commission members want to attend one of those interviews, if two commission members want to attend, it becomes a public meeting and it requires notice and all those other things. So if two of you want to go, maybe if you could designate one to go, it might make things a lot simpler. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on my earlier comments, and I apologize, I got a little ahead of myself. I thought we were just generally on strategy, but on specifically this section, structured interviews. I did want to suggest a little more precision in the language of subsection B. I appreciate the chair's point, and I concur absolutely, but I think this is sort of like government lingo of staff interviews. I think it means to be clear that it is interviews by staff, not that we are interviewing Metro staff, right? So again, just at first glance, that's why I was not kind of understanding how my citizen expert might be incorporated into the work, right? And so most of the interviews will be conducted as staff interviews. I would just be explicit that it will be by the staff of this commission, that, commission members with specific expertise or particular interest in the matter under discussion may attend as well. But this is more of the place where those citizen experts might fit in, I think, right? Because it's just sort of a phone call from staff to incorporate their expertise. The end, right? It's not a big deal. It's not the public interview. But I would ask maybe just for some more clarity in the language here in that subsection B.
Okay, so Kendra, if we could perhaps change staff to commission staff, I think that would that mean that? And then I'd also, in response to your previous comment on the structure, under Little Roman numeral 1, the first section, people to be interviewed, perhaps under community organizations, we could expand that to be community organizations and interested citizens or something like that.
Yeah, I think we would want to be, I think there needs to be a subject matter expertise particular to those interviews, right? And I would not, to your point earlier, Chair, public comment addresses a general citizen wanting to convey things. I would not want to open up this interviews by the commission too broadly, respectfully, just for staff's
Right,
work.
so I think the concept there is if it's a member of the public who just has some ideas and wants to express them about it, that's what the public comment period is for.
Or an email, right?
But we certainly have the ability and the right to, if there's someone who has specific subject matter knowledge who doesn't happen to work for Metro government or whatever, or NES, that it's okay for commission members to talk with them. I mean, I can imagine might be somebody, Johnny, in your operation that would make sense to talk to about something, or or in yours, and so on.
And Chair, I guess just what I want to clarify with Ms. Abkowitz then, I mentioned the example of my citizen person that I thought had subject matter expertise.
Okay.
I don't necessarily want to put myself in the position of interviewing, talking to her, taking notes, coming back, relaying those. I'm just suggesting that if this person is willing, no imposition, has things to share, if the staff of the commission thinks that's expertise that would be helpful, then if that person's willing, staff can call that person, aggregate some of that information, it becomes part of what we're working on. I guess that's rather than myself or yourself as an individual doing that. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think that's important to know because just watching the media reports coming through and seeing where we're going to have to take this, it's going to overwhelm us. It's going to be a lot of information, and anything we can simplify this or to keep it and help with the staff to lean back on that. Let's try to do that. I think that'll be very important because I think there's a lot of great people that are out there that can help us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We have plenty of wheels. Let's put the 4 on the car and move forward. Thank you.
Okay. And then little Roman number 2, and this is interview structure. And that just contains the concept of these interviews are not intended to be sort of very general. What do you think about the storm response? They're designed to be answering specific questions posed to people who have specific knowledge and expertise about that subject. I put primarily factual. I want to know when this happened, who said what to who, and so on. Leave an open-ended option at the end so that if someone has something to say, they can. And then I made a note, these interviews wouldn't be recorded, but they'd result in some interview notes which could be shared with the commission. Is everybody okay with that general approach and concept? Yes. Felicia?
Excuse me. By reaching out to experts and get their comments or expertise for what we need specifically, does it matter if they're out of state?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who's an expert is
Okay.
an expert.
Okay. I was just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that because I didn't know if we wanted someone specifically within state or an academia or whatever like that. So if they were to do this interview, are they able to do it just by talking to someone on the phone and giving their input? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there may be somebody in the OEM department of, I don't know, Illinois or something that had something relevant that would be worth a phone call to talk to them about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just share, as you all know, I've made requests for you all to share questions and then also either perspectives or individuals. Where all that information is going is into 2 different master documents. One is sort of a master listing of questions that the commission may be interested in. And then the second is a master listing of resources we might want to pull on. You actually should already have access to those documents in the SharePoint. We're still updating them and sort of formalizing them and making sure that the level of information that we have about all resources is consistent. And so likely between now and when we sort of formalize our list, I'll actively push that to you. Again, you can go in there and look right now, but that's where all that information is going. And so then we'll make a list of everyone we think needs to be interviewed. You all will share feedback on that, make additions, subtractions, and then we'll start scheduling those things.
And then in
But
term-
we would,
yeah.
but we would be free to ask questions outside of the questions submitted to you, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any limitation. However, I will say if you want it to be asked in one of the interviews conducted by staff, I would need to know that in advance. Now, there will also be, and I don't want to jump ahead, but there's a second phase of interviews that will be hosted in front of this commission during its meetings. And at that point in time, you can ask whatever relevant questions you want, I would say. There's no restrictions as long as it's relevant.
So all of you elected officials can use your vast experience in this field to, the staff interviews we've got set up to take place over about an 8-week period. I mean, I think that is the core of the sort of background work of the commission. And then this is a proposal more than anything else. The idea was that I think we should and we'd be expected to have some public questioning as well of the relevant people. These will probably be the senior people involved in these things. We put in here 4 of them. It could be 3, it could be 6. I mean, we can decide what that is, but 4 seemed like about the right number. Those might be longer meetings than our 2-hour standard, depending on how it comes out. And I sort of built it up from what I thought would be probably the least relevant to the most relevant in terms of the response. Kind of starting out with some of the departments of Metro that are less involved, and ending up with NES, which is clearly the big bear in the room on this subject. Put some specific dates down here just to get them down. Those are again open. But I certainly would appreciate any thoughts you had on this public process. And again, these are ones that, again, I would, by the time we have these interviews, there will be a lot of information developed which can help to structure the interviews. And I think some form of communication, I'm speaking to Kendra now, I guess, some form of communication to the members of the commission about kind of the structure of the interview, with regard to, I don't know, transportation. There seem to have been particular problems with X and Y. And those are the kinds of things that it might be worth exploring and some factual basis. I mean, those are things that are going to be done in front of the public, and I think need to be very carefully planned so that we do a good job and both get the relevant information, but also give the public confidence that this is a sensible process that we're going through.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
For the commission public interviews and kind of how those are grouped and organized, I definitely for that second one, transportation, water services, parks, police, that makes sense to me. I would say perhaps kind of on theme for consistency, potentially, some of the community groups, United Way, Red Cross, that those might be aligned with the NGO or church and community groups, and that perhaps OEM maybe comes at the end. I know that sounds a little odd. Like, I just feel like in the end, it is incumbent on the Metro government, right, to have managed this disaster response and recovery and how we go forward. And if that is ultimately, obviously, the mayor or elected officials, the board of any, like, ultimate accountability. But I wonder if things that we have garnered as we move through the interviews, then kind of being intentional about who has the last segment of interviews, then we're bringing the things we've learned previously to bear. And so, I guess I would just ask us to maybe think into a little bit, and I do apologize, just for the general public, we got this about 6 p.m. after close of business last night, so I did not have sufficient time, I think, to sort of pre-read and organize my thoughts on this. But I do just see maybe if we had a little extra thinking on the sequencing and organization of that series of interviews that might help the interviews be more productive and cogent.
Yeah, I think certainly the outside groups, I'd simply try to divide them into the class of the overarching ones, United Way, who had very general kinds of things, and then much more specific ones, some of the ones you mentioned, for example, who might have something to say. Oh, that's a somewhat artificial distinction. I guess I'm the one responsible for putting NES at the end, and it really was because I was really thinking in terms of an outward-looking public view. If anyone calls me about this, as a number have had, all they want to talk about is NES. And so making that the penultimate one seemed to make sense. We're going to be structuring these based on the feedback, and this is certainly an open question we can certainly stay with. But I guess one general question is: do you think 4 extended public hearings, does that feel right to you, a week apart? And again, these could be 3 or 4 hour sessions as opposed to 2 hours. We get to, and how do you feel about it? Yes.
And I agree with that. And also, Angie, I agree, Office of Emergency Management is one of the pillars of a storm sequence like what we experienced. And I think, in the interest of, trying to vet out and come to, get as much information as we possibly can, that is certainly one of the key organizations. I don't necessarily want to expand your list to 5 per se, but I think we should have at least one of those, move those NGOs, church community groups, up into the group with the other services, their ancillary services that, help support the communities whenever the event happened. But Office of Emergency Management is a standalone entity.
Right. So why don't we again, these are all things that there'll be many chances to discuss this further on. Let's take the NGO and church community groups, put them up under number 2, and then just leave at the end. The last 2 will be OEM and Nashville Electric Service, with at least the option of switching the order if we want to in the end.
And my preference would maybe be 3, and they're a little bit longer rather than 4 that are shorter. I mean, just as far as the balance of time, I respect the commission, but getting multiple things kind of on my calendar, I personally would rather have fewer that are a little bit longer than I would to have more that are shorter, in a general sense. But yeah, it looks like maybe with some of that moving, I don't know if that could get us to 3, but if it can't, 4 is fine. But just wanted to express that preference as staff and you, Chair, consider the final approach.
Do others have feelings about the numbers?
Don't want to contradict you, but I think 4 in this case would be really appropriate just because of the extensive time with a couple of those, most certainly. The others may just be more of reporting and getting, cursory information back.
I appreciate that.
Those other 2 are going to be timely. OEM and NES.
Okay, if anyone has any thoughts on that subject, maybe communicate them to Kendra, and we can take that up going forward. The 4th item under strategy, and I just say these dates, May 14, 21, those are Thursdays like this meeting, and I have not been part of any discussions about what works for people. I presume Kendra has, but if for anyone, the middle of the day on Thursdays is a bad time for some reason, just please let her know. We'll try to find something better. In terms of the interim report, I think the idea then is we would get a first draft of an interim report together. I see that as reasonably compact and factual. This is not a bound 200-page document or anything like that. I say concise, fact-based. An opportunity for the commission to get it ahead of time to review it, and then a meeting in which we go over it and do essentially what we're doing right now, kind of walk through it and see what kind of edits need to be made, and then ultimately delivering it. I hope by July 30th, but certainly by mid-August, as we have in here. I certainly don't want to get close to the absolute requirement, would like to exceed expectations on this. Thoughts about that interim report? Okay. And then the final report, just as a draft, I guess we sort of thought that the approach ought to be, there's an interim report, there will probably be some public comments on that report, an opportunity to receive those and consider whether either something should be included or some additional work should be done in some fashion for the final report. A set of draft recommendations that come out of this. These are the ones of, this is what happened, and this is what we recommend that the mayor, the council, look at in terms of mitigating these issues in the future. An opportunity for the commission to review those recommendations and talk. That will be certainly an interesting, long meeting. A draft final report, a commission meeting to approve the final report, and then out the door it goes. Basically, depending on printing time stuff, mid-November. I don't think there's any reason to extend this into March of next year. That's 1 year, which is fine, but we can do this in that kind of a time scale, I think, effectively. And it makes it also much closer to and much more relevant to the issue at hand. Thoughts about that? Okay. And then finally, there's in here all these timeline things which are discussed in the body of the work plan. We've tried to pull out here into what looks like a week by week thing as to what's going on. That's not really something that we need to edit. It's just sort of pulling together in one place all of the things that are there. But any thoughts you have on that or this presentation? Is this helpful to you to maintain this? Okay. Good. Well, I think with the edits that have been suggested and so on, we have a plan. So Kendra, you can put those together and then maybe just circulate them back to the commission as this is our first cut at the plan, to be modified as needed and as we discover more things going forward. Let's see, you have here, Kendra, comprehensive event timeline. Did you have in mind something there different from what we've already done?
I think we've covered it.
Okay. Kendra has worked up some interview procedures, which have been provided to you here. Interview protocols is called.
And I'm happy to maybe quickly give some context prior to our review and discussion. So I think what we wanted to make sure in discussion with the chair and the law team is that we do have a little bit of structure and consistency with which we're approaching these interviews, but also recognize that the questions we ask are going to be highly dependent on the topics of interest and then the expertise of the individual. And so obviously you see here that everyone will sort of be given access to a similar set of pre-read information and materials. It'll roughly be the same as our document repository. Again, just want to note that there might be some confidentiality concerns that we need to be responsive to. But wanted to put forth a basic conversation structure, but again, recognize that there's a lot more detail that will be uncovered in each conversation based on expertise and what we're interested in. I think everything else in here should be fairly self-explanatory, and we're roughly mirroring the same evaluation criteria that's in the work plan.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, please.
I just want to make sure I have this this correctly. So basically, what we're doing is we're going to bring in several or interview several professionals to tell us about what they're doing and how to best circumvent situations such as this. Is this correct? to a degree.
I would characterize it maybe slightly differently. So it's correct, but I would, yes, and we're asking them to essentially review the same documentation that we've received in our document repository, and then share feedback on any issues or challenges or observations they have from that material, but then also weaving in their subject matter expertise and industry best practice from perspectives that they might have to share outside of this specific event.
Okay. So with doing that, I do know that NES has hired several consultants, public relations firms, and several others since this incident. Are we getting any information, or is the mayor getting any information about how this is going to change what has already transpired with NES and dealing with, situations such as this? Do we have any information about these consultants, all these people they've just hired on, that would be beneficial to the commission? Because if they're actively doing this now, from the understanding I have, we need to find out what's happening. That's part of all of this as well. Because if we're looking and bringing in professionals to say this what could be done and this, we can't look at it from one side. We got to find out what, if we're saying this needs to be done, what are the consultants saying from NES's side that could be done to make a difference?
So I'll share maybe a couple of pieces of information that I think are responsive to your request. One, as I mentioned yesterday, we met with NES's legal counsel to again talk about sort of transfer of information between the two parties. We also discussed sort of efforts to respect each other's process, but also not duplicate efforts. And in the course of the conversation, they talked about sort of two different layers of review and continuous improvement that they're going through. One is happening operationally on as part of NES's leadership's efforts. They're conducting after-action reviews, but have also already publicly stated that they're committed to 4 pillars that sort of talk about their major, I think, challenge and improvement areas. And there is work occurring in those work streams. I anticipate that as part of our informational interviews with NES, and I think there will be several, we'll get into more details as to how that work is progressing, and that might lead to a little bit of a snowball effect where they say, hey, you should really talk to XYZ about specifically what's happening, and that might be some of their consultants. The second level of work that's happening, as I think we discussed last time, is a board review. So the NES board is actively working with counsel to, or counsel that they have hired to commission an after-action review from national leading experts that do this for electric utilities across the country. As we heard yesterday, the 2 attorneys that are handling that effort have received several different proposals. I don't think they have selected who's actually going to perform that review, but that is another piece of information that we'll add into our document repository once that formal report is complete. So what I would say is I think we have a couple of different opportunities to better understand NES's efforts and then make sure that we're summarizing that and sharing that with you. And in the course of the public interviews, I think we can gather some of that information too.
Okay, great. That's great, because I think also too, just like Speaker Harwell was saying earlier about budgeting, we need to, these consultants, they cost as well. So that would be part of some of the things we want to look at is future budgeting as well as past budgeting and how things were budgeted. So I think it would be a good idea for us to know more about what they're actually able to bring to the table, how much it's going to cost, and to get some of their information, because these consultants, as you were stating, they have specific reasons for being where they are and what they're consulting on. And I would like to know, the list of the consultants, if possible, what they're actually doing. I don't have to know, or the commission doesn't have to know everything they're doing, but what is their purpose? And
Speaker?
And if I could add one thing to your comments, which I think are good. I've been asked this so many times. I think follow up with and add to a question. Who gives the authority for these consultants to be hired? Is it done at the board level? Is it done internally at NES? And does approval need to be made? I've been asked
Agree.
that, and I think we need to know.
agree.
Yeah, I would say to you, I think we need to be careful about, I've been on a bunch of boards and I always get very critical of a lot of times people don't know what you're supposed to do as a board member and will get themselves involved in details that the board should not be messing with, and the like. So I think I agree with what you said. Those are things we need to have. But each of these areas, each of these agencies, NES and the metro agencies and so on, they're going to have their own internal, they certainly ought to have their own internal process to identify these things. They're not waiting for us on this. Where we can add value, I think, is maybe in some of the, those are necessarily siloed, is in some of the across the different silos where some of the communication and coordination, may have fallen down in particular. So I think when we get to the point of talking about recommendations, we can just be careful about like what's in our scope of recommendations and what really is none of our business, about how they go about doing something. But I think the idea of a commission like this, the reason I agreed to do this was that if you have a bunch of even very good siloed things, there still is a need for some overarching look for it because there's a lot of pieces that didn't necessarily work together right. And that's something we can uniquely provide, and I think provide a valuable service. Other thoughts about this interview protocol? And again, as we develop that list of interviews, anyone who would like to be present for those, I think, are invited to. We can't have two without a much more elaborate thing, but certainly people are welcome to do that. Yes.
Kendra, I know you've got a laundry list of items here in the pre-read materials. One item that we might want to put in there, and it'll probably fall under OEM, was EOC activation. Like all the activities that came out of the EOC, you see a lot of, there will be scribe notes, be activation levels, times, stamps, dates. That's just a component. I just want to verbally put that on there because I feel like EOC, Emergency Operations Center, is your command and coordination hub, right? Mm-hmm. In reality, that's where a lot of this all this coordination and should have worked out of, right? And I think that's what Ms. Henderson was talking about, is that OEM, Metro Nashville, should have been the big driver of this. And at times I felt like looking at this afar, in the dark, per se, some of us were in the dark quite a bit of time, felt like NES was a driver of this, right? But everybody was pointing back to NES. NES, what are you doing? But in reality, I felt like Nashville OEM really should have been one of the big drivers on this. But anyway, EOC, all things EOC, I think there will be a lot of good information that'll be able to come out of that, and we'll be able to decipher that, eventually make recommendations.
Yeah, I personally think that one of the things that might come out of this, that I've experienced before in other settings, is the question about whether OEM felt that it had the expertise and it had the portfolio to mess around with what NES was doing in terms of this coordination. If you remember, I'm just thinking, if you remember back when TVA had that huge ash spill in East Tennessee, and I was governor at the time, and it was real clear that we hadn't done everything we needed to because there was just this natural deference to this federal agency, even though the legal responsibility for what they were doing lay with the state. And that was something, that's fixable. And there may well be things like that with with OEM and a sort of semi-independent entity like NES. Yeah.
Mr. Chair. A thought I had was that when we do these interviews and you assign or voluntarily committee members are assigned to participate in that, and you're limiting the number because of, not making it a public meeting per se, with all the things that go along with that to 2 members, give some thought to assigning people that have expertise potentially in utility or in community communications, things like that, to where we get those folks.
Well, you're going to be awful busy if that.
Well, volunteer.
Yeah, okay. I'm certainly not going to assign anyone to do this. What I was really offering was this can happen completely at the staff level if you want, but just make it clear if someone would like to be a part of one or more of those, that certainly is invited, just subject to the open records obligations we have. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. I think because it is somewhat in the spirit or the kind of the conduct of the interview, but also it's going to go to the eventual reporting. I would want to make sure around kind of the conversation structure, we absolutely have to know at a detailed level precisely how this transpired. Accountability is important, but there's no gotcha intent here, right? Like from my perspective as an elected official, I want to make sure that we put things in place so that, God forbid, another major ice storm, right? We have a better generally response. Like we learned from what happened here. And so as well, from that sort of elected official seat, and that goes to my question about the format of the after actions that the departments do. I want to know, looking ahead, what do the departments think for their, SOPs, standard operating procedures, internal policy, staffing, budget? Are there policy needs that need to be codified at our legislative level? Are these just internal processes? If they are internal processes improvements, how are those accountable, right? And so if Metro's standard after action for these things asks those questions of every department, fine. But if they don't, then I would ask that we're explicit that those happen in the interviews, right? And that kind of goes to my question of what the departments rightly are doing themselves and, that kind of apples to apples across those things. But as an elected official, I just want to make sure that any budgetary implications, staffing implications, policy implications are in that final report, so that we're hearing from those departments themselves what they think, distilling that through best practice and everything that we're aggregating, and then that comes out on that recommendations end of things.
I think those are very good points, and I would just emphasize, I think our approach to this, first of all, ought to be the working assumption is that everyone we talk to is reasonably competent and really is trying to do the right thing. And like any group of people, they're going to come up short in some areas, and it's our job to sort of help identify those things and try to figure out what's happening. And I think this also may go to some legislative kinds of things as well. Again, without back when Katrina hit New Orleans, and the state had a lot of impact from people coming from Louisiana into the state. The state of Tennessee did a pretty good job, okay? And we talked with some people after that was over with one of these AARs about where some of the failings were in Louisiana. The big difference was in the response was that in Tennessee, the governor had a lot of power to do things in response to an emergency. In Louisiana, it was all of these elected officials with their own domain. You had elected Secretary of Agriculture, and you had all the, and nobody was there in charge, and nobody could make determinations about things. There may be things like that go on in Metro, where there are things that you would have liked to have done, but were not legally possible. But that's something the council can address and can, and can fix. And I think specifically the interaction between a charter organization like NES and the rest of Metro government, I mean, that relationship may need to be updated in some way in response to this, and that could be one of the observations that we make. And don't worry, we won't touch Dixon. Okay, in terms of the upcoming meeting schedule, we had a meeting which I wanted to schedule for, I believe it was the 2nd of April. Is that correct, Kendra?
Yeah, that's a proposed date at this point.
This is the March 12th. And the idea was at that point, we will have an interview list and enough stuff that we can have a conversation about kind of where we're going from here. And that's prior to the beginning of the intensive interview cycle. Would like to do that. And then basically we kind of go quiet for 4 or 5 weeks while these staff things go on. And then there will be the 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it turns out to be, meetings in which we hold the public events, and then a couple of meetings in July to go over an interim report and make any changes and get ready to send it out. So I want to be sensitive to everyone's schedules and time and so on. And believe me, if there's somebody who can't be at a meeting for some reason on this kind of stuff, you won't get fired from the commission. We'll miss you, but as long as we have a quorum, we can move ahead with things. Did you have something?
Kind of, sort of. As I stated earlier, I know we've had a lot of media reports about, transparency and special privileges and for some people. And a lot of people that really suffered were those that, they had no choice but to leave out of their homes. In some areas they could hardly afford it, electricity or whatever. I have heard from several people in some communities that they feel like that privileged individuals were able to reach out to the president of NES to get special treatment. That doesn't look good at all. Anytime the media get a hold of something, whether it's correct or incorrect, what are we doing to address those concerns as far as that? Are we saying, doing anything as it relates to investigating to see if that's true? Will we be going into that aspect of it, or are we going to leave it alone? Because you know how it is I've always known that when the media get a hold of something and that information's out there, as far as crisis communications, you got to shut it down immediately. You've got to address it, be transparent, be honest. Are we going to address any of those kind of issues and concerns?
Well, I think the commission can address whatever it decides to. I guess I would say that I'd be hesitant on that subject. I feel for the CEO of NES. There's people you get calls from that you can't just tell them to go away. It's and so on. But I think media has done some reporting on that. Again, I'm open to it, but I really think that if we focus on the mechanics of how the executive branch of Metro government and its various agencies responded to this and how it might be better, that probably is the best place to be. But if the commission feels differently about things we should consider, I don't mind putting that out. But I think that putting my political hat on, I think that would be stepping into a landmine that
And I
we don't
agree.
necessarily need to step into.
And I was just thinking maybe the best way to suggest, to handle something like that, because it is out there, it's out there. Because of that, I'm just saying probably one of the things I see the best way to handle situations like that is to do what we're doing, is to do a better job in the future.
Yeah.
What can we do to eliminate this problem in the future and reassure people that if you believe these things are happening, or if you are so convinced that you're being treated differently, we've got the solution. And I think that's the main thing I'm trying to say is that we need to let the public know that we are solving an issue, not so much tackling the he say, she say, or hearsay. More so of we're going to tackle this situation. The past is the past. We can't change that, but this is what we're going to do in the future.
Well, I think, a fruitful area for exploration, which you and others have mentioned here on the commission, is the extent to which there are communities in Nashville which, for various reasons, felt ignored or, were reluctant to call up and complain. I mean, I've certainly observed many times in my life in politics that there are people who are just much more cowed by the notion of trying to deal with some government entity than, any one of us, would be. And I think it sometimes shows up in, the squeaky wheel getting the oil is a universal principle. And how we protect some of those more marginalized communities and make sure they get treated fairly in this process. I know it's a priority of the mayors, and I think it should be of the commission as well. Yes.
Chair, if I may, I think just to follow up on what Ms. Easley was saying, I do think from a best practice perspective, right, I think, NES should contemplate from a policy perspective for their, director, CEO, kind of if you are contacted by, a individual, an elected official, blah, 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 this is a best practice response, right? And the consistency in that response. Elected officials are under an immense amount of pressure, especially as a crisis continues. People get in a panic mode. They are grasping for all straws. And sometimes from a place of best intentions, right? But I do give guidance to my own members, and I try to be very careful myself, right? I get Angie, do you know anybody? No. I am happy to ask a systems-based question, right? How is this being implemented? What are the anticipated times, right? A general question. I am happy to elevate a particular concern. Are you aware in this area of low visibility that there are, in fact, 4 poles down in a series, some things like that are to the benefit of all members of the community in the adjacent area. So I do think there is sort of best practice communication by elected officials and also by organizations in response to elected officials. And I think that's within the realm of this commission, right? Level setting the expectation of that is important.
I think that's a very good point. And it might be something we should consider, which is, we have, as everyone points out over the years, quite a large council, which is advantageous in many ways because it means that a lot of council members are much closer to their communities than you would be with a much smaller council. And the very nature of those is the first place. I mean, my council member is the first place I would go with one of these things. So maybe setting up some mechanism by which council members can be part of the front end of information gathering and stuff, setting up a formal way as opposed to you got to figure out, who to call at OEM or who to call at NES could be something we take a look at.
Yeah, and I do think it does create some confusion in the community, Chair, when you have 40 individuals part-time, they approach their work differently, serve different populations, communities with different levels of demand, access, right? And so as autonomous elected individuals, right, our office, myself, can provide guidance around what I think is best practice. But do you see a wide variation of expectation of the elected official? To your point, Chair, that's that first point of access, right? But I do think it's important to kind of level set on the council side of the house, right? You should perhaps not be posting on Facebook, send me your outage, I'll get it to NES, right? no, there's a process, right? It's fair to understand the amount of outage relative to the rest of the system, what that means for your area, for the retirement facilities, the hospitals, the critical care customers, right? Those are fair questions of elected officials. But I do think that wide, disparate variety of outbound communication with the best of intentions by elected officials sometimes gives the perception to the community of, well, this council member asked for this and told me this, and right, to all varying levels of state service, local service. But I do think that's something that I'm particularly mindful of, and I want to make sure that on the backside of this that we're addressing.
Well, I could never manage the council, so maybe you can in this regard. It's, I think that's a good point. I mean, the notion you put on the table of the council members being a sort of essential communication points in both directions in this, I think is very important. We should make a part of our discussions.
Mr. Chair, and I agree with you, could be a bit of a landmine, certainly, because if you were to go through my phone, you're going to see county mayors, city mayors, you're going to see all these elected officials that I regularly contact and communications with, have relationships with. And without question, when you have a large event like this, they find their way to you through others or directly as well. And to your point, generally we address general information, and I'm sure that's what, when we question or have that question to, people that are at NES, the same type of thing that, I can let them know that they're in a group with a large number of people. And then when we get this large number on, we'll get those people on. It's usually not a drawn out, very much detailed thing. We do get accused from other communities outside of our home rule area where they think, well, you're not paying as much attention to us over in Hickman County, or in Nashville's case, Williamson County or Hendersonville. And those things came up in my response during this storm, and I had to provide and put it out onto social media, more specific, detailed information showing the resources we had in those communities to disprove that, well, you're not there. Well, just because you don't see me doesn't mean I'm not there. And so, it's a challenging task. And it's like a lot of things, whenever there's a disaster that drags out over time, people start finding ways to get to people. And, but how they act out certainly is the thing that differentiates. And I don't think that anyone in our industry would do something that would be outside the norms of how we handle these responses. And I just want to make that clear because I've seen it, I've lived it. You hit the nail on the head. I'm glad to hear that you understand, the scope of how these things work.
Yeah, I mean, the council really is, could be a real resource in this stuff. And it's a two-way street. I mean, you need ways for them to get a questions answered, but you also need to provide information to them that they can use in responding to their suits. I mean, you can't tell a council member not to post on, you can try. You can try, yeah. Well, I was in the pre-social media era, which is really good. That I think that's an excellent point. We're at that point in the meeting here. We have a few minutes left. I would just offer if there's anything which is not on the agenda, which anyone would like to bring up to the commission, and any points you'd like to make, this would be a good opportunity to do it. Anything you want? Anything further? Beth? Johnny, anything? I'm good. Alicia?
Well, if no one else has anything, we are at the part of the meeting where I guess we could thank those who have helped to put this all together. Gratitude and appreciation to the staff here at the Metro Nashville School Board for hosting us today. And gratitude and appreciation to all the members of the commission for your willingness to be here today.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.